All right, so welcome to the Working Smarter group for another session. One thing I would say before we kick off is if you've missed any of the sessions, do go into the group and you can see, well actually if you go into the videos tab on the Tribe, you will see all the videos from my group and all the other groups as well. So these are all recorded and they are posted usually within 24 hours of the session finishing. I usually process mine first thing the following day. You can go back and you can catch up, so that'd be great. If you've missed anything, do go along and you can just click on those videos and see what you missed. But the session today in the Working Smarter group is we kind of touched on the fact we were going to talk about project starts, kicking off a project, that kind of thing. And if you remember from the very kind of first session I did, I lent back to the dinosaur I have in my book, which is all about the projects being a certain shape. The joke was, the dinosaurs or brontosauruses are thin at one end, thick in the middle, and thin again at the far end. But I was arguing that for a project manager, it's very different, and actually, projects are very thick at the front end and at the back end for good project managers, and really part of that is around starting a project the right way to be successful. As the great quote says, a bad beginning makes a bad ending. And it's not impossible to try and wrestle with a project throughout its life cycle and bring it back into some shape, but it's really not easy. If you get it wrong from the start, you really have a bit of a problem with regards to the trajectory that the project is going to go on. And that's the problem. It's the fact that if you start in the wrong direction, the delta quickly and swiftly becomes quite significant, and all the work that you do may not bring it back to what was originally intended. And certainly you're going to waste a lot of time, a lot of effort in trying to do that. So getting it right at the front end, I think, is really, really critical. And ahead of the game is really how you behave when you start a project. And maybe all of this has gone out the window completely in the current situation, because I am well aware that many projects are kicking off in a completely virtual way. But what I've talked about in the past has been around setting the scene. And this particularly is relevant, I think, when you are a project manager delivering projects inside your own organization, and you may well work with some of the same people again and again. If you're part of an IT project community, for example, if you're working regularly with certain business managers and so forth, subject matter experts, then the chances are that your next project may well have one or more of the same people on it. The other thing that we know is the truth is, of course, that you will start your next project before you finish your current project. That's just the realities of life. Nobody gets that nice break and downtime in between. That just isn't the way the world operates. So what the challenge to a lot of project managers is, well, you're just in the latter stages of a project. It's going, it's had its challenges, it's had its successes, it's had its team building, it's had its focus, its deliverables. It's riding that momentum that projects have towards the end. And suddenly you start another project, and you start it with some of the same people, for example. It's how do you differentiate, how do you create that kind of clear blue water between the last project and the next project? And ahead of the game is an idea around you kind of resetting the standards for this next project. That you want this next project to be even better than the last project. You want it to be very successful, even more successful. And it's part of it is a mindset, I believe. Part of it is just thinking about how you behave, and not just rolling on like, okay, we finished that meeting on the last project, let's just talk about the new project straight away. It's kind of separating in some way. The one project manager I knew, and he worked in an organisation that was fairly typical. It had business casual dress was the norm, but his way of making a statement when a new project started was on that day he would come in and he would wear a full suit, suit and tie, and he would just it was for him it was a kind of image statement of, hey, we're starting something new, and then he would relax back into the normal dress code of the rest of the community. But it's just his way of saying, hey, we're starting something new, and look, I'm representing it in this way. So ahead of the game is just thinking about how you behave, how you prepare, how you engage your new project team. And I think the important point here is that you do that. You somehow have to get across to your project team, this new project team you're working with. As I said, you may have some people that you've already worked with in the last project, and perhaps some people you've worked with in previous projects. But get them together and go, hey, new project. And this is where we're going with it. This is what we're going to do with it. These are all the deliverables and the timescales, etc. But this is how we're going to behave on this project. Forget everything that's going on right now that you might be working on. This is how we're going to behave on this project, because I want this project to be even more successful than all of the last projects you've worked on. And this kind of thought process of being ahead of the game is like that. So, kind of some top tips for getting ahead. I mean, start as you mean to go on, I think is critical. You know, it is setting that level of authority. One of the worst things I've seen is where a project manager who is, you know, stressed and hassled and, you know, worn out by a project, tries to start a new project but doesn't do anything. They just literally drift into new projects, and it almost, you know, that new project almost picks up the stress and the strain and the perhaps lack of momentum of the previous projects. So start as you mean to go on. And confidence does breed success. You've got to stand up as a project manager and go, hey, this is great. You know, forget everything that's gone on in the past. You know, we've had successes, we've had challenges, we've worked well as a team, but this is good. This new project is going to be even more successful. The dress for success, that's kind of the hint I said beforehand about that. It's just one way that someone differentiated the start of a project. Someone else I know, they used to, when they had a new project, they would insist on the first project meeting taking place somewhere special, and that was often, you know, booking a meeting room somewhere at a hotel or something like that, just to make it different, just to give them again that clear blue water between everything else that's going on. Now, get the upper hand. I mean, this is not some devious tactic of, you know, screwing over everybody else that is involved in the project, but it is important, I think, to take control. That's really what I mean by this, is the fact that, you know, you have discipline, you have processes, you have control, you know what you want. Then maintain that. Don't give way in the early stages of the project. You know, it's kind of, you know, if someone doesn't do something, then call it out. You know, in a nice, supportive way, not an aggressive, challenging way, but call it out. Because it gives, you know, I'll be honest, it gives you kind of the moral high ground. It gives you the fact that you are seen as a project manager who has the standards, who has that confidence to say, no, we're doing it this way, and I don't care what we've done beforehand. This is how we run this project. Be prepared, absolutely. There's a lot of homework that has to be done here. I mean, you know, don't go to your kick-off meeting holding the project briefing document or something like that you've never read beforehand. I mean, just be as prepared as you possibly can. Being prepared is understanding what this project is trying to achieve. It's about understanding the business landscape that the project is being delivered over the top of. It's about understanding the people you have got and the people you haven't got. It's about understanding deadlines and milestones that are coming up in the future. It's about understanding as best you can the experiences of all the main players on your project, you know, whether they be the project sponsor or the subject matter experts or the significant stakeholders. Yeah, just be prepared as much as you possibly can, and anticipate everything you can. I mean, this really is this and knowing the end game. These are the two key things for a project manager, I think, is that you know, I talked in an earlier one about if you are buried in all the work that's going on and you never get any time to stand up or sit back and reflect, you lose this great skill of a project manager, which is you know, keeping your eye on the end game, what you're trying to achieve, and anticipating. It's all, you know, it is all the chess moves, if you like, of what could go wrong, what could happen, what if something doesn't turn up on time, what if someone doesn't deliver on time, all those sort of things. Just if you're constantly processing that anticipation, then you can definitely be better prepared for when something does go wrong. So some top tips there, I think, for getting ahead. Start as you mean to go on. Confidence does breed success. I mean, dress for success, but differentiate the start of the project in some way. You know, get the upper hand. That's really about, you know, setting your standards and gaining that respect from the people involved. As much preparation as possible. Your job is to constantly look above the tree line and anticipate everything that's coming towards you. And to do that, you definitely need to know the end game. What is it this project is trying to deliver? And first impressions count. I think I might have mentioned this story in an earlier session, but this is what I learned. So it's really important. And I was working on a project in London. The project was just kicking off. I was a fairly new project manager at that point. It was so long ago that we didn't have, there were no mobile phones or laptops, etc. But I had this great big pilot case with all 2 great big box files in and lots of other bits of paper, everything I needed to know for the project. So I was turning up for the first time on site to a steering meeting, and in those days we used to have great big magnetic tapes which had the software on. I was asked to deliver it, which I did. I met some people in the car park as I parked up, and I walked across to the IT department away from the main building, past this group of people, said hello in a confident, bright way, because I was a young, enthusiastic project manager, handed over the tapes to the IT department, headed back into the main building. And I discovered that actually the group of people I passed were the board members who made up a significant part of the steering group. And the CEO he just instantly took it that I was just a techie. We love techie, very, very important, but he didn't see me as a project manager because of that image he had of me walking across the car park with some magnetic tapes under my arm, and they were fairly hefty sized magnetic tapes in those days. But it took me a long, long time to really get across the view that I was anything like a project manager and a competent project manager at that. We got there. It was actually, this is the longest project I ever worked on. It was just over 2.5 years at the end of the project. And, we all gained certain respect for each other during that period of time. Some very high highs and some extremely low lows, but we got there in the end. But the message here is that first impressions really do count. So just think about that. And managing a sponsor, we talked a lot about managing a sponsor. I'm not going to dwell too much on that. But I'm just going to visit this thing again. So, if you want to know anything, we've done 2 sessions on sponsors. If you haven't heard them, then go and listen to the 2 video recordings because it's a big topic. But the thing I talk about is that the first time you meet with a project sponsor, just think of 3 things. 3 things are really important, and one is to find out as much as you can about the project sponsor, which means you go and talk to other project managers that they may have worked with, for example. If you have that kind of relationship with other sponsors, talk to them about their experiences for their peers, whatever you can manage to do. Because again, it's a bit like being as prepared as possible. The more that you actually understand when you go to the first meeting, the better. Because you can go in knowing possibly what their experience levels are as a project sponsor, have they recently had some successes or challenges, what are their communication styles like, etc. And then the other 2 things to think about the first meeting is asking them what their hopes and their fears are. Very open questions. What do they hope this project will deliver? What are they worried about? What are their concerns? What are their fears? Because by doing that, you're going to get them to talk, hopefully, and you'll be able to judge very quickly whether they are behind this project, fully committed to this project, or is it just they've been given this project to sponsor. It's almost like a disinterested, but it's something I have to do type situation. Again, you can balance your work according to that. But if you ask them that, if you ask them about their hopes, they should be able to talk in a reasonably passionate way about what they think this project is going to bring to the business. And if you talk to them about what their fears are, what their concerns are, then they are going to talk, hopefully, about things that worry them, and you can understand that, and you can actually work with them to overcome those issues, those challenges, those worries. Managing the creep. I mean, this is all about the scope control. But if you're going to put it in place, and once it's in place, make sure that you follow it. And if it's almost the first time any change comes through, then get your whole team together, physically or virtually, doesn't really matter, but just step your way through the scope control process, the change management process, explaining step by step, because not everybody understands it. Now I know this to a degree varies according to the methodology that you're using, but at the end of the day there still has to be some sort of scope management. So what is appropriate for you? And I personally favour a very simple flow diagram as the best way of explaining this. And if you can, put that up on your project wall somewhere, again, physically or virtually, digitally, it's all fine. But make it visible so that you can step people through it and go, hey, look, okay, we've had a change request come through. Now, what do we do about it? These are the options we've got. You know, how do we go about considering it? How do we go about investigating? How do we go about considering the impact, the cost, the time, etc., or the value of it? You know, what are the options that we could actually agree it, or we could reject it, or we could defer it? You know, all those sort of things. Whatever it is your process, then take your core team through it so they fully understand and don't become contributors to scope creep in the future. And communication breakdown is sort of, you know, it's a major thing, isn't it? Communication is huge when it comes to everything we do as project managers. And one of the first things you've got to do, I think, as a project manager, is you've got to get communication and a communication process in place very quickly. You need to understand all of your stakeholders in order to do that. You need to get it down and make sure people are following it. This is a great quote, I think, Cicero. You know, if you wish to persuade me, you must think my thoughts, feel my feelings, and speak my words. In other words, don't talk to me in your language, talk to me in my language, talk to me in the way I understand it. And this will vary according to where you know what sort of project you're doing. But you know, typical projects will quite often will have, in the world that I come from, it will often have an IT-centric part of it and a business-centric part of it. And getting those two groups to talk to each other and understand each other is not always simple. They certainly do not think the same thoughts, feel the same feelings, and speak the same words. Well, definitely don't speak the same words. So it's bringing those two things together. It's one of the great things you need to do as a project manager. And I think top tips for communication. Well, look, reporting and not communicating. Let's be utterly clear about that. I know these days you can produce the most amazing reports, 16 pages of every possible data point, graphs and diagrams and images and beautiful font layouts, and you know, these are truly a thing of beauty these days. And the fact that you then email it to every single stakeholder and their best friend, the reality is you've not communicated to anybody. It's, you know, communication is this key area that differentiates the very top project managers. Depends what you read. I mean, those books vary between 70 and 90% of your time would be some form of communication. When you think about it, you know, the written communication, the verbal communication, the communication that takes place in the conversations you have over around the coffee machine, the conversations that take place at steering meetings, the conversations that take place in between project team members. Communication is massive, and it's an area where you can quickly get things wrong. And reporting is one of those areas because, you know, to get the effect, or to make for effective communication, you have to identify critical information, you have to deliver in the right time through the optimum method. I mean, it is the 4 R's. It's right information at the right time to the right person in the right way. And typically, if you get any one of those wrong, then you will have failed in some way to communicate effectively. And that's a lot of work for a project manager, because you know every single person is different, and that's why reporting doesn't work. You can give this report to everybody, and they will not like it. Most people do not want to see 16 pages of reports. They want to be given in a form that they want to receive it in, and they want the information that they want, and only that information. You know, it's speak the language I speak sort of thing. It is. Some people, you know, they want a face-to-face meeting. Some people want a 5-box PowerPoint summary. Some people want an email bulletin update. Some people want a phone call. You know, everybody's different. And for a project manager, as I said, that communication plan they put together has got to represent that. And if you get that wrong, you're not doing it, because, as I said, right information, right time, right person, the right way. And you know, this reliance on standardized reporting, or even standardized, if you like, internal social tools, is not necessarily going to work, and is prone to things being missed or things being misunderstood. And you know, when I ran a PMO, we used to do these regular health checks, and one of the things that we found on our projects, because we did the health check several weeks, in some cases a few months into the project life cycle, around the end of the planning cycle. These are fairly substantial projects in those days. And what we found was that there was always a communication plan in place, but that communication plan had never changed from day one. And that was a weakness because the project team had grown, people had changed, people had come on board for ramping up, and people had disappeared. Subject matter experts have been brought in, third parties have been engaged, system integrators sometimes have been involved, third party suppliers were engaged and working on the project, contractors were coming in. Well, this communication plan from day one is a pointless document on day 100 or whatever. The communication plan has got to keep up to date, and the project manager needs to make sure that is working. And you need to educate people about your own needs as well. It's the fact that I need information from you, and what I'm going to do with it is this, and that's why it's so important. Not just the fact of saying I need this data on this date every week, make it happen. Explain to people why you need it, and what you're going to do with it, and how important it is. I mean, it often helps, if I'm honest, to be able to include the phrase that, well, the CEO looks at it, for example. That usually gets people in attention of actually doing something on time and to a decent quality level. But make it happen. Put the effort in as far as the communication is concerned. I think it's really, really important. And it's like everything at the front end of the project. By setting these standards out there and calling out any early deviation, when someone doesn't supply us with information on time, when someone doesn't turn up for a meeting, when someone doesn't respond, when someone tries to get an additional piece of scope into the project, for example, when someone is just not engaged and they're not putting the effort or in, and it's almost threatening that original project intention, then call it out and be loud and proud at that point. Again, do it in a sensitive way. So, to start with, it's very much as a one-to-one conversation. Like, well, look here, you didn't make the last meeting. Can you tell me why? Okay, well, you do realise that we had to make some decisions at that meeting, and you missed out on that, and we really value you as a subject matter expert or whatever. Those sort of conversations. And if that doesn't work, then you just have to kind of escalate, and that's where you get into the world of that great partnership with your project sponsor. And again, I can't remember if I told this story or not, but this is a great example of bad communication, because I was working on this project, I think it was going badly wrong. I'd taken it over, it was supposed to deliver at a certain date, it didn't, and I prepared this beautiful journey of explanation for people ready to present to the project manager and sponsor of the client I was working with, and then it was blown out of the water by one of my DBA actually talking to the project manager over the copy machine and telling me, well, by the way, your project's going to be 2 months late. And I was, I walked into a meeting where I was basically cannon fodder as far as that meeting was concerned, because I was responsible for making the project late. I wasn't. It was other people, and it was mostly down to the client. So you have to, the essence behind that sort of the thought behind that story is that, when you think about projects, there's kind of various layers of conversation and communication going on. There's your project team talking to each other about the project. That happens. And there's the conversation that takes place in a wider community, your stakeholders and beyond. And you have to ensure that that is managed and controlled, not in a sort of 1984 way, but just the fact there are certain things that need to be communicated in a certain way. And there was a certain protocol behind certain pieces of communication. In this case, all of my great work for preparing this journey of problems and issues, etc., that were nothing to do with myself or my company, but were mostly to do with the client, it would disappear, because immediately they had, as far as I was concerned, the moral high ground, and we were solely responsible for making their project late. And in fact, I was exactly right. That project was delivered precisely when I said it was going to be delivered, but delivered by a different project manager at the end, because he didn't really want me around at that point. So, you prepare, be prepared for the casual communications and make sure they are well managed. And I think part of that comes from ensuring your team is well briefed on what is expected of them, what is right and wrong when it comes to communication. All right, we're going to go away. We've done it so far. We seem to have a kind of similar number as usual, around about 15 people, I think. So you are all on mute. You can, however, unmute yourself when you have something to say. Just looking at the questions here. Let's just catch up on that one. Yeah, kickoff meeting is absolutely important. Totally agree with that. kick-off meeting should talk a lot about how we plan to. I agree with that. So when I was talking about the meeting with the sponsor, that's not the kick-off meeting. That's just the first meeting with a project sponsor. But yes, when you get to kick-off meeting, I think a kick-off meeting should be a bit of both. It should be a bit of solid planning or explanation about what needs to be achieved with this project, and a bit of a celebration, a bit of a rah-rah. And yes, I think that's really important. I see a question here, Gabrielle. Okay, what do you do if you join later and the project is underway? I think there it's very much of having a controlled handover from the previous project manager and making sure that that handover is done. Your problems come if their approach to the project is fundamentally different from your own. And I think that's something that can certainly give you some issues, because if they run the project in a tight, controlled way, then taking over is a fairly easy thing to do. If they run it in a very, very relaxed way, then it's very much less so, because you have to kind of reinstate your discipline and control. There's a strong argument, I would say, that if you're taking over a project like that you have almost a re-kick-off meeting. Go in there, do the briefing, do the handover, and then set up a session which is like a mini kick-off that resets the scene, like introduces yourself and resets the standards, I believe. But okay, let's open it up. If you have something to say, please unmute yourself and talk to the group.
Hi, Peter. This is Gabrielle. My question was also around this: what is if there was no project manager before? And the project 2 months underway, and and suddenly the organization realizes, oh my God, this is not as easy as we thought it is. And then they think, okay, you come in now and you fix it.
Yeah. Well, it comes down, I think, to what authority are they giving you to fix it. Because if they really want you to fix it, then they should listen to what you say. And I go back to well, in this case, I think we need to have almost a pause and a reset for the project, a re-kick-off, I think you should give yourself a period of time to re-baseline your understanding of the project, get to grips, and then I think there is some point that says, okay, we're going to relaunch this project at this point in time. But I don't know if that is possible in your situation, Gabrielle.
Yeah, so I did something very similar. Like, I spent a lot of time with the stakeholders before I kicked off anything, before I said anything. I just wanted to understand the situation.
Yeah, no, it's important. Again, I mean, pretty much everything I talked about is understanding, having clarity, and then it is that get ahead of the game. Begin as you intend to continue, and it is creating that break point and saying, okay, this has already happened. It's not wasted, but this is the situation right now, and let's revisit the launch of this project, I believe. Anybody else have any experiences like that of taking over a project partway through? I mean, it was something I did for a couple of years. I think I mentioned it before. I spent 2 years doing project recovery as part of what I did, and that was always the case, because you were stepping into a project that was already in trouble. I mean, in every case, obviously, but you kind of had to do that same thing. You stepped in, you began to understand as much as you can, and then you created a break in it and goes, okay, we're stopping now. I mean, we're not, this stop may only last 24 hours or 48 hours, but we are stopping and we are resetting the conditions for moving forward with this project, and these are the critical things we need to focus on. So I think the same thing applies there.
Well, project recovery could be a good next topic for another time.
Okay, I'll make a note of that one. I'm happy to do that. Well, I was thinking that maybe it would be very topical for the next session to talk about virtual project management or remote project management. But yes, project recovery. I've made a note of that. Thank you.
This is Todd. I have a question about, or a comment about your suggestion or observation that communications in the right media, the right format is important. I'm thinking of situations where you have your regular project meetings and you're able to issue minutes, and you flag areas that require decisions, either by part of the project team or sometimes by the project sponsor. and you need a decision faster than, let's say, your steering committee monthly meeting, for example. Is it a reasonable approach to say, okay, the project sponsors presumably, or I would put project sponsors on the routine distribution list for the meeting minutes, and if the way I have approached it or would like to approach it is to say, if there's a particular sponsor that has to make a decision and report back to the project management of the team, I wouldn't just count on the email distribution and assuming that they're going to have read it. I would call them or flag it in a separate email saying, hey, by the way, if you notice in the last meeting that was held on Tuesday, your group needs to give us feedback or a decision on X, and we're expecting it by this date. Is that a fair approach to?
Yes, I think so. I do. I think so. If you've got something critical, then you follow it up. You don't. I think there's 2 points in what you said. One is, as far as the sponsor is concerned, I mean, you need to understand what the sponsor wants as far as communication is concerned, and if they want to be copied on minutes from your team meetings, etc., that's fantastic. But I've often found the case that they don't. They want you to summarise for them in your regular meetings to them. So that's the first thing. I think the second thing is, yes, when you have something that is urgent that needs to be closed down for the next full meeting, whatever, then you personally chase it, you personally communicate it, and you set up a call, set up a meeting, or whatever it may be, to reinforce the action, the request, and the deadline to it, just to make sure that it actually happens. Because we all know that it doesn't always happen, and you can turn up to your next formal meeting and suddenly you're already behind because the 2 things haven't been done they should have been done.
Maybe you could also.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, carry on.
For Tarek, maybe you could also just. It depends what it is. If the magnitude is not so great, you could also the decision you got, like flag it as a working assumption and have it finally then ratified in the steer call. Also, but there, of course, you have the danger that the steer call in the end says no, that's not what we want. But yeah.
Yeah, I understand. You could say, I think this is a reasonable decision, but of course it could be overruled, or it could be overtaken by events. Something else happened that you weren't aware of in another business line. Good point. Thanks.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, of course, if you get decisions made and you don't have the full steer code there, you're likely to miss someone's input, and so. But if the sponsor says it's okay, I guess. I mean, depends how your whole governance is set up.
Yeah, absolutely. It comes down to the governance. It comes down to the level of decision that is going to be made. Obviously, if it's significant, then you need the steer code support or whatever the full governance support is. And I think you can also, if you've got a good relationship with your sponsor and you need something chased, then you can use the sponsor for that if it's at that level. So use all the capability you have to hand to get something like that wrapped up. I would also say, if you're interested, I know I attended Elizabeth Harron's call last Friday, and that was all about project reporting. It was a good conversation, a good presentation from her. So if you're interested in listening to Elizabeth Harron's session on that, then do so.
Peter?
Yes.
There's one other point that you made earlier, and I think this is so important, especially for us as project managers. And you were talking about communicating at the right time, at the right place, to the right person, in the right way.
Yes.
And I think so often when we think on what happened with COVID, if somebody would have told us at the beginning of January that we would shut down the economy, like if you would have communicated at that point, everybody would have just laughed.
Oh, yes.
And then it all happened so quickly. And sometimes we as project managers, we can see a problem coming. But even when we communicate it perhaps too early, it's not being accepted. So do you have any advice, any research on how to communicate like issues that are really in the future, but you as a project manager can see it?
I don't specifically to hand, but it's a very interesting one. I think we could certainly take communication to a further level on this one. So I've just made a note of that one. I think part of it comes down to trust between yourself and your sponsor, particularly as far as that's concerned, of having an authoritative pair of ears, if you like, to listen to you when you talk about what you think is, what worries you in the future. I said about sponsor, talking to them about what their hopes and what their fears are. Well, you as a project manager will have the same. You'll have hopes and you'll have fears as well. So I think that's an interesting one, Gabrielle. So I've made a note of it, and let's come back to that one on a future session, if that's okay. But I will ask, everybody else on the call, have you come across that? Have you encountered that sort of thing of where your lone voice, calling out a problem that you foresee and nobody pays any attention to it until it's too late? It seems not. Okay. So everybody else on the call, it's good to hear from lots of people. It's we've got a reasonable group here. So what are your thoughts around starting projects or things you've encountered that projects might have been challenging in the past? So let's talk as a group. We're all friends here. Now this is a good example of the downside to this kind of virtual engagement, because if we're sitting in a room, I could stare at someone and try and force them to say something. It's not so easy to do. Hi.
Well, I can tell something inconsequential, but the Brontosaurus you showed, I did not know that this was actually linked to a Monty Python sketch until
Yes.
I actually read one of her books recently, and there it was mentioned. So it's worth googling on YouTube.
Yes, it's a Monty Python sketch. It's John Cleese dressed up as a woman called Miss Anne Elk, putting forward her theory of brontosauruses. Graham Chapman, one of the Pythons no longer with us, is trying to interview her. And it's a classic Monty Python sketch. I think it's one that gave me the inspiration for this concept, because so many people, when they almost described or drew up a project, they gave it this shape of something that gets much bigger in the middle. Well, it does. It does for the project team and the people engaged in working on it. But for you as a project manager, it's really less. I think it's far more that the good project manager puts a lot of effort in the middle, front end rather, a lot of effort at the back end to learn lessons. And I think we could as a group we can step through the life cycle like that. We can talk about the middle of the project and the end of the project. That's other things that I have noted down for conversations in the future. But my point about the Brontosaurus really is the fact that from an effective project manager's point of view, it's in the middle there where you are supposed to be giving yourself time to look ahead, to anticipate problems, to see where you're going, to make sure the project's heading in the right direction, to be proactive, engage and talk to your project team, and to be very quickly reactive when there are problems. And if you're buried in work at that point, or if you're busy trying to carry the dinosaur, then you're not going to be able to do that. That's a bad thing. Right, any other thoughts on starting up a project?
Well, how do you really find out? There was one point, expect the end game. Do you have some tips and really good digging that you really are solving the right problem?
I mean, that's one of the challenges. At the start of the project, there is a business case, there's some definition, there's a project initiation document, there's where it is you have. That defines the scope, statement of work. There's a whole bunch of things, and it will describe what it is you're trying to do. And typically, all parties will have come together and tried to come to an agreement to communicate something to other people about what this project's trying to achieve. But the end game is an interesting thing. people said, the old days, if you deliver something on time, to budget, to scope, with a reasonable quality level, then it was a success. And the reality of my experience is that isn't necessarily the case. I've delivered projects to meet all that criteria, and the customers of the projects themselves have been less than happy because we haven't actually moved in tune with what the business needs are. We haven't actually understood the business needs, even though the business needs were defined in the document so many weeks or months ago by other people. So, I think the end game is truly, having that shape and understanding of the project to begin with, and you can only do that by being given the documents that define it, perhaps challenging those with the project sponsor for clarity and understanding and updates. But as you go through the project, I think you also need to keep an eye very much on any changes that take place in the business, internally or externally actually, that may well influence what is going to be a good end result for this project. And it may be that you have to initiate some changes yourself as a project manager, or bring those arguments to the steering group, because you can see that the project is going to be delivered and it's going to miss the mark. There's a whole concept behind the early stages of projects, and I talk about managing expectations or expectation management during that period of time. Because there's early stages, everybody's trying to understand from each other what it is they want to achieve, particularly when there's technology involved. What can it do versus what does the business actually need it to do. And I think the more flexible and agile approach you have at the early stages of a project, the better it is. Some of the worst ones are, when you're locked into a fixed price contract, for example, if you're in the commercial world of projects, that has something that's defined and you are blindly delivering to that, because the chances are, particularly the longer the project goes on, the less likely that is going to be taken as a success or value to the business. And so, it's all about just keeping an eye on the project of where it's supposed to be going, but also looking at what it should be doing for the business, and stepping up and having those conversations with the right people if you feel, as a project manager, that the end results may not be the best for the business, that you can anticipate or see something that could be better, and being brave. And it's all part of that. You're not just an automated project manager delivering to the plan as prescribed by the business case that's defined during the early stages as initiate, etc. But you are having those sort of grown-up conversations with the senior stakeholders and reflecting on what this project should be doing for them and their business. So that was quite a long, rambling answer, I think, but...
Yeah. Well, your colleague Rick Morris once shared an example of a project. We must get a data warehouse, and I think what I learned out of that is kind of like, if you the data warehouse is usually a means to an end. And so I mean, you already defined what the means is for the end, and the real end was not really. I mean, Rick did some digging and found out what the real thing was, and that's why I would also think once you enter a project and the means has already been decided, I guess that would be a warning flag to dig what's the real problem you want to solve.
Yes, and I think, again, it's if people can really truly describe the visibility of purpose of this project, then you're on to a good start, I thought, because if they can describe it over and above anything that's documented, then I hope they have the mindset to adjust and flex the project as you move forward. Because I have delivered projects late into a different scope and a little bit more budget than I was supposed to, and things like that, and the business has been delighted because it's delivered something that's really useful to them. I've also been involved in projects that have been the most rigorous possible and have actually kept out end users from any involvement. And of course, when you go and talk to the end users as part of the project process, they go, "Well, this isn't going to work. This isn't going to be practical for us." So I see it less these days. When I was last running the projects, I see it less. People seem to have a more open mind but certainly in some cases it can be very rigid and blinkered. And you just know in your heart that it's not going to deliver something that's going to fit the business at the time it's finally delivered.
Thank you.
Okay. I think also, the more iterative approach to projects is helping in this one. The biggest project I worked on, the definition was done some 18 months before the first deliverables were made, and that's something we had to learn during that project, was to reshape what it is we're trying to deliver, because it was so long ago that someone sat down and defined what it is that the business needed, and of course the business had changed. There's no doubt about that. No. Okay, so my intention next week, so I think it's going to be opportune, is to talk about communication a little bit more, particularly around virtual communication, virtual team working, etc. There's some good examples out there. I'm sure you're all involved in this, so I'd love to hear some examples from you on next week call. A little less than me talking, a bit more of engaging. But unless anybody else has anything else to say, I will call it for this evening. So thank you again for your time. As I said at the beginning, if there are sessions you haven't heard, then please go and listen to the recordings when you get a chance. And I look forward to speaking to you next week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Bye.